All right. Aloha, everyone. Welcome back to the Fit2Fat2Fit Experience podcast. It's me, Drew Manning, coming to you. And thank you guys for tuning in for another episode on this podcast. So, in today's episode, it's another great one with my ex-wife, Lynn. She decided to come on, and she's bringing her childhood friend on. Her name is Tasha Lynn. We have a great conversation, and we talk a lot about self-love. So we go deep on this and why this is important for weight loss, why it's important for better relationships with yourself and other people in your life. It just makes you a better human, developing self-love. We talk about how to develop self-love. So let me tell you a little bit about her. She's at 35 years old. Tasha Lynn was a twice divorced single mom living in poverty with no prospects. She decided it was time to get her life together. During the subsequent years, she consumed countless self-help books, podcasts, and therapy, and she realized that self-love was the key to everything, just like I talked about. But nobody tells us how to achieve it, which is true. So she developed this program to bridge that gap, and she created a step-by-step guide for your journey to self-love, healing, and living an authentic life. And the reason we brought her on is because Lynn and I actually did her program, and so we talk about our experience doing the program and the way it was designed and how it has actually helped me during this hard phase of my life, which if you've been following me on social media, you probably heard about. Self-love definitely is something that I've struggled with my whole life, and it's definitely something that I'm again struggling with, even though I've done the work, because of certain life challenges that have happened that have really questioned my belief in that self-love. So but her program is amazing. So we talk about that. So the link to that will be in the show notes. But before we jump into the episode with Tasha, this whole podcast is brought to you by Complete Wellness, which is my supplement company. Complete Wellness is a company that I started about 3 years ago or so. With the idea behind it, I wanted to make supplements that one, use the highest quality ingredients possible. 2, was as affordable as possible. And 3, they all taste amazing, because I don't care how healthy something is. If it doesn't taste good, people just aren't going to take it. And so that's why I created Complete Wellness. We have a full lineup of keto-friendly products, and we have another lineup of just general health and wellness products that you'll absolutely love. They're for anybody, whether you're doing keto or not. Complete Wellness is pretty much what it's in the name. It's complete and has everything you need. And I'm really, really happy and really proud of the supplement company, Complete Wellness. It's exciting to see where it's been, where it is now, and where it's going. So thank you guys for the support. If you use the discount code podcast at checkout, for all the listeners of the podcast out there, you'll get 20% off your order. So just use the word PODCAST podcast, and you'll get 20% off. You can check out our full lineup of keto-friendly products. I think MCT oil powder is our number one seller, followed by our keto meal replacement, which is made with the grass-fed collagen protein. And and then I think the next one might be BHBs or our new peanut butter cup whey protein, which is amazing. So head over to CompleteWellness.com, check them out. Thank you guys for the love, and let's get into this episode with Tasha. All right, Tasha, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Tasha! Hi!
Yes, as many of you might know, Lynn and Tasha go way back. How many years have you guys known each other?
Way back, guys. Okay.
12th grade? No, not 12th grade. 12 years old.
12 years old.
We had our 25-year friendiversary last year. It was kind of a big deal.
We did have a romantic 25-year anniversary date. Tasha is one of the people that has been with me through all of life's ups and downs pretty much.
Yeah.
And so it's actually really fun for me to be here and be on the podcast. As everybody knows, it's rare for me to be back on Drew's podcast. But I also did wear, and I'm just going to show it, a special shirt that Drew bought for me last Mother's Day. It says best ex-wife ever. And considering the theme of self-love and that Drew and I both did this program of Tasha's, I just felt like it was an appropriate attire to be wearing for the podcast today.
Love it.
Yeah. So, yeah. Well, the people that are listening on audio won't be able to see it, but they can visualize it. Why don't you, Lynn, introduce Tasha a little bit and how you guys know each other, and then we'll let Tasha kind of fill in the gaps.
Yes. I mean, I'm going to let Tasha share a little bit about how she came about deciding to do this program. But just like we said, I've known Tasha for over 25 years. We both, obviously being, as she is my best friend, we have a lot of similarities. Everybody has a lot of differences. But one of the things I've always loved about Tasha is her passion for life, her work ethic, her ability to constantly, I always kind of saw Tasha as this person, like always striving to like elevate. So she's always been into self-help. She's always been into improvement. She's always been the person that's like striving to do better and better and better. And that's kind of what took her, I think, on this path of doing this self-love program, was years and years of her digesting so much to do with personal and self-growth. And it's a topic that her and I have talked about a lot. We talk a lot about mental and emotional health struggles because we both feel that in this industry or in this world in general, it's not talked about nearly enough. Like the way that we see ourselves and mental and emotional well-being really hits every area of our life. And it's one of those areas where we don't have enough quality information, right? Like I go to therapy. I know Tasha goes to therapy. I know Drew goes to therapy, and that's great. However, it's also something most people can't afford. Most people can't I drop $150 a week to go to a therapist for 50 minutes a week. And I've known through working with women for over a decade that most people don't have the luxury of being able to go to therapy and work through all the trauma that we have in our life. And because of that, it's really opened up in our industry an opportunity with podcasts, with books, with programs for people to be able to have those tools and content without having to spend hundreds, if not thousands of dollars a month to get there.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
So Tasha, in your program, which we both have done, and I'll be totally honest with you, like I've gotten to know you on such a deeper level because I didn't know all these stories about you, Tasha. But people listening have no idea about that. So why don't you kind of tell us a little bit about your story and why you decided to create this program?
Absolutely. So all of this started when I found myself twice divorced at 35. And I just took a step back and looked at my life and I was like, wow, I really need to get my life together. And so I dove into countless self-help books, countless podcasts, weekly therapy, all of these different things to try to heal my toxic behavior patterns and to try to figure out why my life was going the way that it was. And I did really good for about 2 years, right? I got into all of this healing and I was doing great. And then, like for all of us, the pandemic hit and I backslid hard. Just all of the things that I've been working so hard to overcome really came back up again. I fell back into those behavior patterns. And I just really wasn't sure how to get out of that rut. And then one day last September, I was driving my daughter to school and I was listening to a podcast. And I heard a line that has literally changed my life and that I say to myself every single day from then on. It is, what would you choose if you loved yourself? What decisions would you make if you loved yourself the most? And in that moment, I had just such a powerful, intuitive bolt. Like, this is the key to everything. Self-love is the key to everything. But the problem is, a lot of these programs that I've been consuming don't tell us how to get there. Everyone tells us you need to love yourself. You need to love yourself, but nobody tells us how. Yeah. That day is the day I started writing this program because I wanted to bridge the gap between everyone telling us we needed to love ourselves and nobody telling us how. So what I've created is basically this step-by-step guide for walking you through the journey of finding your way to self-love and to healing and to living your most authentic life. And basically I take personal stories from my life, which you mentioned. I also take journal prompts, activities. We have a Facebook group, and all of these things combined pulls together this program that I think is really powerful.
Yes. And the key there that I really love, and I don't know if you feel this way too, Drew, but the key to this is it drives me crazy that people will tell us, this would help your life, or live authentically, love yourself, reduce stress. But we're always like, all of those things sound great in theory, but how do we get there? And I remember feeling the same thing. A lot of people have known me over the years, especially because Drew and I worked together for so long, we're married for so long. And, I went through a huge hormonal imbalance and the same thing happened. I remember my doctor sitting next to me. She goes, you need to reduce stress and find more joy. And I got mad. I was pissed. I was like, my comment to her, and she's fabulous. Everyone knows I refer her all the time for clients, but like my first response to her was like, I looked to her and I was like, oh, well, why don't you come live in my life and deal with everything that I'm dealing with in my life and tell me how I can just remove the stress and find joy, right? So I feel like exactly what you said, Tasha. We live in this society where we are becoming more consciously aware and we are talking about these issues more than we used to, which is great. But then people still feel this lack of, what do I do to get there? If I don't have a therapist that's walking me through every week how to find what my triggers are, what my coping mechanisms are, how am I going to create boundaries and improve my life in any way? And that's what this kind of program or journey takes us on.
Yeah. And I think a very similar thing is in the fitness industry. It's like telling someone, hey, just lose weight. Like, hey, if you lose the weight, then all your problems will go away. It's like, well, yeah, I know that.
Yeah.
But that's what I love about your program is it gives you a roadmap of structure of exactly what to do every single day. Like you said, journal prompts and some activities in there that are really powerful that help you to develop that self-love, which when you're in a stressful situation, like you did with your therapist, like it's easy to get offended or upset when people are like, oh, yeah, just love yourself. It's like, trust me, for 40, 50 years, you can't just make that decision. So talk to us a little bit about what you have in the program, and then we'll talk about our personal experience of doing it and how powerful it was for us.
Absolutely. Well, I can't wait to hear about you guys' personal experience because we haven't talked about this yet. But so how it's laid out is basically it is a 5-step program and people can complete it at the pace that feels right for them. There are people that can complete 1 step per week, making it like a 5-week program, but some people take much longer because I noticed this on my own healing journey as I was writing the program is that there were certain sections that I just needed time to digest and to process.
Yes.
And so we've laid it out in that we suggest you do a little bit every day, but there are going to be times when you're really in it, that you need to take some extra time for yourself. So basically every step, there are 3 journal prompts and 2 activities that you can do. And the activities are pretty interactive. Journal prompts, obviously self-explanatory. And then we have daily posts in our Facebook group, and I do lives every week. And I really hold your hand through the process because I originally just wrote this for myself. I had no idea this was going to be out into the world for public consumption. So this is near and dear to my heart in that it was for me. And so it's so special to me when people go through this journey and I get to go through it with them. So that's kind of what the outline of that looks like.
Yeah, I think what you said is so true because there was times during the program where it did get heavy and you do have to work through some shit. And it's really, really hard to just be like, okay, what's the next thing? It's like you got to stay in these areas where you're like, okay, this area is something that I've never really tapped into and I need some time to digest it. And so I'm glad that you mentioned that because that's something I notice is like, yeah, sure, you can go through it and just check off the list, but when you're doing it, it does get heavy, but that's where the power of the program lies. And so, I guess I'll go first with what I experienced.
Yeah.
A couple of the powerful things that come to mind are, making a list of the things you love about yourself. And I think that's hard for people because we don't really think about, oh, what do I love about myself? Maybe 2 or 3 things, but to come up with a list, I think I took like an hour to really think about this of what do I really love about myself, and to write that down is powerful. And then I put it up in my bathroom mirror so that I would see it every day. And I think that was the first one that really was powerful for me because I think as a man, because I'm the only man here in this conversation, but I think this program it's not just for women, it's also for men too. I think for men, it's hard to admit oh yeah, these things that I love about myself, because at least I've been taught, like, don't be boastful, don't be proud, and so I've always thought I was less than because I wasn't never allowed to boast about myself or anything like that. So thinking about things that I truly love about myself took a while, but it was that for me was the very first powerful one that I noticed for myself. And I'll let you go.
Well, and I think and I know it's being talked about more, but it needs to be talked about far more, is in our society, we really have created a system where men don't feel comfortable emoting and they don't feel comfortable sharing their feelings. And sometimes they're even shamed by women, society, or other men for having feelings. Gasp, we all have feelings. Everyone has insecurities. Men have insecurities. Men have pain. Men have, self-esteem issues. Men also are living inauthentically. And I think opening up more opportunity. Like, I love that Drew wanted to do this program, and it actually came at a perfect time because, as some people know, he took a kind of a break from social media and from different aspects of work because he was struggling internally. And I've been in that same position too. Like, you can't serve others if you can't serve from an empty well, right? And a lot of times in our lives, I think, especially for men, we haven't allowed them the permission to feel the feelings, to work through that emotional stuff. So I was really proud of you that you'd be even willing to that and to do this program, to take a look, because a lot of men don't feel comfortable enough doing that.
Yeah. But I also will say, I think women struggle in a similar way with loving themselves and loving their bodies. And we'll get to loving your bodies in a second. But I'll let you
that was a powerful exercise. One of the exercises on that. My experience was, I love doing the program, and obviously it is a little different because I knew Tasha. So I know, but what was interesting is, even though I know these stories of Tasha, like when you really read somebody's story and they're really letting you peek underneath to see all of the trauma and the fear and the shame they felt, like, it is very vulnerable. And even though I've known Tasha for 25 years, I was like sobbing in some of these stories. And I'm like, I know these things about her life. I know these stories, but it's the feeling, it's the underlying feeling that then, of course, we can't help because of it's human nature that we relate to areas of our life that we're struggling. And we felt that same fear, and we felt that same shame. And that's caused like a reaction in me as I'm like sitting there reading through and crying. And then what I love about the program too is it's an actual journal built in. So with these activities, you're writing through and you're kind of like, you're finally processing. And it is hard because there are certain activities, full disclosure, because I've been in therapy since I was 12, that I was like, oh, this activity is easy for me. I don't mind doing this. And there's others that I had an immediate, like, I don't want to do that. And that's interesting, right? Because it really shows and highlights the areas that we have work to do as far as self-love and where our insecurities are. And even more so, me walking through and realizing, like, I didn't realize how a lot of my religious upbringing shaped a lot of the insecurities and shame I have about myself. And that was something that I didn't expect to come up in this program. That came up a lot. I don't know about you, but religion came up a lot for me in this one.
For sure. I want to allow Tasha to touch on this particular exercise and why you included that and why that was so powerful for you, the listing of things you love about yourself. And then I'll touch on the religious thing in a second.
I think it's exactly what you guys said, just giving yourself permission to love yourself. I think, the first two exercises, like, the first one being list all of the things that you love about yourself. And then the second one being list all the things that you love about your body. Like, we start off at this, like, oh, okay, I guess so. And I think just giving yourself permission to sit down and throw away the societal messaging and throw away the doubts and throw away all of these things that are rattling around in our heads and focus on, okay, when all of that is gone, when it's just me and my paper and pen, what do I love about myself? And I think it's really transformative. And even now, even though that I've spent a year writing this program and like living in this space, even now I have that list on my mirror and I refer back to it all the time because I think it's so easy to lose sight of those things. And so, Drew, I especially love, I love that you're so vulnerable and that you were willing to do the program, because I think a lot of times when it comes to self-help, everyone thinks that's like a woman's thing, right? Yeah. And I just think that men deserve the space to also love themselves, to also live an authentic life, to have feelings, to express those feelings, and how powerful that is, and how much women want to see that from them. Like, that's amazing. Like, give me more of that.
Women want this, men.
Yes,
They
they
do.
absolutely do.
They really do.
I wonder. I think that's the real reason why I have so many, I think, female followers is because of that. It's mostly female, and I get what you're saying. I think the timing of this talk show was really powerful because, like Lynn said, I was at a rock bottom moment when she said, "Hey, would you want to do this?" And I was at a place where I'm like, "Yes, I will. I'm open to anything." And I was like, "Okay, I'll read through this and see what it's about." And then I gotta say, you did an awesome job, Tasha, of like describing your story in such detail that made it so relatable. It's like I could, totally see your perspective, what you went through and the trauma that was caused and the lessons that you learned in those moments. And it's super powerful. It's very powerful. And so like I was all about doing these things to help me. And I think, this is where it's the power of your program is in these little activities. And to touch on the religious upbringing thing, like that for me was really interesting because you talked about that in your story, Tasha, and all three of us grew up Mormon but nothing against
and
that
this
religion.
isn't anti-Mormon in any way.
It's just religion in general.
Uncovering religion. Yeah.
Every religion has, a dark side to it where it does have a negative effect on certain people. It's not like an end-all, be-all, fix-all type of thing that works for everyone. But we are aware enough now, self-aware enough to look back and see some of the damage that it's done because of our perception of that religion at that time in our life. And yeah, it's interesting. And I'm still working on deprogramming or unlearning some of those old patterns. Do you feel like that's the same for you, Tasha?
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing about this is I'd obviously been to a ton of therapy and done a lot of work before I started writing this. But my memories of a lot of the later parts of my religious upbringing, my family left the church when I was 14. But I had created a story so that I wouldn't have to deal with any of it. I told everybody in my life that my family left the church before I could remember, so that I wouldn't have to process some of the traumatic things that happened in my teenage years. And when I dove into my writing and writing my story, I would write a draft of something, and then I would go back and look at it and be like, is this true? And then I would write another draft. And so delving into the truth more and more and more, I finally, all of these memories that I had actually suppressed since I was 14 years old came up. And that was like a whole new level of trauma that I had to deal with. But it was so powerful just taking hold of my story like that. But honestly, I think for the religious upbringing thing, it was mostly just a matter of people telling me my entire life that I had to act a certain way, that I had to look a certain way, talk a certain way, and that my life had to be laid out in this specific path, or there would be all these consequences. Either God hates me, or my family or my neighborhood, or, nobody around me would accept me if I didn't fall in line. And so that even though I left the church when I was 14, that messaging stayed with me. The self-abandonment and the living my life for other people stayed with me. And so having a chance to delve back into where that came from, and then also do the work to shed all of those layers, was really a huge part of my transformation.
Yeah, I love that. And one of the things that I love in the program and this was different for me than the work that I've done in therapy. So I felt it was extra beneficial because it was something I hadn't, a lot of times things affect us on a subconscious level, right? We just go through life. And then in therapy, a lot of times what happens is you're like, I'm mad about this. And then they like dive deeper and they're like, actually, this is like childhood trauma that you haven't fixed. And it created this story. And that's what's really happening, right? One of the things that you do in your program that I was like it blew me out of the water was, they kind of call it, the term for it is shadow work, right? Is that the term for it?
Yep.
And I feel like this is something that I haven't really done in therapy before and through the years of therapy. And almost maybe it's a little bit new because I have heard of the term more over the past couple of years, but you dive on it a little bit in your program, where I spent so much of my life dissecting myself into pieces. And I might like one component of myself or one thing, like, oh, I'm a good friend, right? But then the parts where maybe I see as negative, or society sees as negative, or that one friend, is like, it really bothers me when you do this. It's like all of these, quote, negative attributes that I want to hide from myself. And I didn't see how how harmful it is to self to do that, to dissect ourselves and feel like, oh, I'm only going to accept these parts of me and constantly be trying to change myself, right? Because
I'm
that's
so
almost
glad. Yeah, I'm so glad you brought this up. So the biggest part of shadow work for me is one time I was in a therapy session and I was talking about how I was having all of these human emotions of jealousy and of fear and of all the, and I was like, I said to my therapist, I shouldn't feel like this. I know better. And I thought I know better because I had done all of this self-help work, right? And she looked at me and she said, this is the dark side of the toxic positivity movement. This is when people are like good vibes only, love and light. This is the problem with that, because we then push these shadow parts of ourselves away and we say, this is bad. I can't feel these feelings, good vibes only over here. But the truth is, in order to do deep healing, we need to accept these parts of ourselves, right? We need to take jealousy, for example, and we need to say, I feel this emotion because of this thing that happened in my life. This is the lesson that I needed to learn from it. This is what it protected me from. And it served its purpose. And I accept that that is a part of the human experience. And then we integrate that into our healing. Because anytime that we deny parts of ourselves, we are rejecting healing. So shadow work is so important. I'm glad that you like that.
Yes.
So the question there is, in the moment of the jealousy, in the moment of the heartache, the pain, how do we accept that part of ourselves? Because I've struggled with that myself, where it's like, I know better. I know the tools to get out of this. Like, why am I still feeling this feeling? I think that's the hard part for me, is like, okay, in the moment, it's really hard to see the lesson out of it. Like,
absolutely.
You know, so,
I love that you asked this question because this came up for me so much in my healing journey.
Okay, gotcha.
And for me, the most important part about healing and integrating these parts into ourselves is feeling them, right? So we are having a human experience. We are going to feel these feelings. So if I have feelings of jealousy, of heartbreak, I let myself feel them fully. And that's the key. The key is to not push them away. It is to completely live in that experience and to feel it in your body. And a lot of people don't know what feeling your feelings is, right? Like we think our feelings, but feeling your feelings is, where does that live in your body? Where does that jealousy live? Where does that heartbreak live? And to just sit with it. And that is where most people can't hang, right? Because we have all of our coping mechanisms. We pull out our phone, we scroll through social media, we have a drink, we do whatever we need to do to not feel the feelings. So we sit in that and we let ourselves fully feel it. And eventually, if you sit in feeling your feelings, they do go away. And with time and with journaling and with meditation and with letting yourself feel all the emotions that you're feeling, you will start to integrate and you will start to learn the lesson. You'll never know the lesson in the moment. Oh my gosh, I can't imagine you going through like a breakup or something and like you're having the breakup conversation. You're like, well, the lesson this taught me was, no, of course that's not going to happen. So I think it's so important. I say this a million times a day, give yourself grace, give yourself grace, give yourself time, let yourself be human, tell yourself that it is okay, give yourself permission to feel all of the things. You'll figure out the lessons later.
Yeah.
And being able to love yourself with it all, right? Like instead of pushing it down and pushing it away of like, oh, I don't feel jealousy ever. It's like, we're humans. From time to time, we're going to feel jealous. And by trying to control our emotions, that creates a lot of negativity and shame on us. Like we talk about in the program, like now I'm shaming myself for the fact that I'm having a human response and I'm having an emotion. Exactly. I don't want to do that. I'm also not going to then now the difference is you feel it, but you're not necessarily going to react to that. Right. Like, and what's really interesting, and I didn't tell you this, Tasha, but it's been really helpful for me when I went through that and kind of like it clicked for me when I was in that shadow work section, and I started implementing it with my daughter. So one of the things that Drew and I have struggled with a little bit is having a child in middle school.
Same.
And being a teenager, preteen. And it's been it's been hard. We could probably do an entire podcast on that. It's been hard. And it's been hard because just like with everything in our life, we make it personal. We make it about us. Like, how could we be better? Does this mean I'm not a good parent, or they're mad or whatever? But one of the things that I noticed as I worked through this program was that as my child would respond and have these big emotions, right? And that's what happens, right? They go through puberty, they have big emotions, they're teenagers, they're like, nah. I was trying to control her emotions. I was trying to be like, stop overreacting, stop screaming, stop flailing, stop crying, right? Like, I'm trying to do what I did with my shadow stuff of like, ooh, bad feelings, run. And that only exacerbated it and made it worse, and also made her feel unheard. So what I learned through your program, which I've implemented for both my children, is when they have these emotions, right? When these moments come up, these flares of emotions come up, I've been able to sit with them and be like, I can understand why you're really upset. It's totally okay to feel all the big feelings. It's okay to be angry or anxious or whatever those big feelings are. Like, we need to sit with that. And if you want to take some space, if you want me to be there holding you, if you want to be in your room alone, no matter what the response is for you to feel it, like, feel it. And then I said, and when you're ready, and if you want to help talk through with it with me, have me come up with solutions of things that maybe we can try, teach you techniques like I taught my daughter the box breathing for anxiety, then great. But just by allowing them to feel their feelings and have their emotions without all the anger and annoyance and shame, which is common for us parents, right? I'm supposed to freaking getting her to class and she's having a breakdown. It makes me upset. Like, instead of doing that, I've been able to pause and be like, I don't want to be shamed for having my human reaction and response. And I don't want to start creating that in my children. So it was really powerful for me.
That's a great point. I think a lot of times when we give ourselves grace, that naturally extends to everybody in our lives. Or when we bear witness to our own feelings without trying to fix them or shove them away or whatever, we then have the capacity to bear witness to other people's feelings too. And that's just a really powerful place to be. Like, maybe there isn't anything to fix. Maybe we just get to be there. And that's that's amazing. I'm so glad to hear that.
Yeah. And just to kind of recap what you were talking about before this is, the pain is one of those things that as humans, we try and run away from, we try and numb or distract ourselves. So we stop feeling those feelings because for some of us, those feelings are too painful to keep feeling, right? But I love Rumi's quote about the cure for pain is in the pain. So facing the pain, facing that fear and learning from it, not to say that it's going to make the pain, any better, but it'll help you not stay stuck there. And I think that's really important. I do want to make sure we have enough time. I do want to touch on the body thing because I think that was really powerful. It's different for men and for women, right? I would love for you to talk about, why you included that part of standing in front of a mirror naked and looking at every single inch of you and saying, hey, this is me, and list the things you love about your body.
So body work has always been, this is powerful for me for several reasons. One, I have always, ever since I got out of high school and was no longer like doing softball for 4 hours a day or whatever, I just have a larger body, right? And so I just felt like for me to accept myself as a fat person in a larger body was really important because I remember the day that I really that I wrote the section of that program, and I was sitting down with my sister and I was talking to her about this date that I had gone on and how men were always rejecting me for my body. And she looked at me and she was like, wait, do you love your body though? Like, are you happy in your skin? And I was like, holy crap. Actually, now that you mention it, yeah. Like, I don't stand in front of the mirror and criticize myself. I'm comfortable in my skin. I eat well. I move every day. And just because I don't have like the genetic component of having a smaller body, doesn't mean that I'm less worthy. It doesn't mean that I love myself less. And so it's just this really breakthrough for me. Like, it doesn't matter what everybody else says. I'm actually allowed to love myself in my skin exactly as it is. And honestly, that was it was a really important part of the program for me to just be like, I'm not going to tell anyone that they need to look a certain way, that they need to lose weight, that their bodies should look a certain way, because I personally feel Like, my body is beautiful, and I know that I eat healthy, and I know that I move. And so in my past, I've had a breast augmentation, I had a tummy tuck, all of these things in the past for my body to look the way that society tells me that it should look.
Mm-hmm.
And so really stepping into, what if I just loved myself exactly the way that I am right now, has literally changed my entire life. Like, what if I just love my body today? So, yeah.
I think that's really powerful, because I think there are people out there that do hate their bodies, right?
Mm-hmm.
They've been programmed to think they're disgusting, and there's parts of their bodies that they just do hate. So for you, Tasha, this might be a hard question, but how would you help that person? Is it just a decision in your head, like, hey, just decide to love yourself? Or how do you get them to, look at them? Because I know some people might struggle to do this exercise of standing in front of the mirror completely naked, even when no one's around, and allowing them to see themselves fully naked. That might be really hard for people. How could you help someone be brave, have that courage and bravery to eventually do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that's why this isn't just like a one exercise program or like a 1 week program, because it's the deprogramming to get to the place. So I understand this is like the second exercise, but maybe it's not an exercise you can complete until the end. I know for me, it was just years of shedding the societal expectations, which we do through the program. So I think, and a lot of times it is actually fake it until you make it. So one of the promises that I made myself a long time ago, and it's one of the promises that I like to have people make in the program, is I just don't speak any negative words about my body aloud, and I never will again. My child will never hear a negative word about my body. My partner, my whoever will never hear me say anything out loud that is negative about my body, because I think words are powerful. And so it starts there. Like, even if maybe sometimes in my head I'm not there, it's never coming out of my mouth. And so I think we start with steps like that. And then self-correction. If I ever look in the mirror and I'm like, oh, my thighs look big today or whatever, and I'm like, but look at how strong my thighs are to, carry me through my gym workout, or just that small reframing. And it's always a work in progress. And I think especially if you don't have a body, and like in my case, may never have a body that fits into societal expectations, it's definitely everyday work. But you have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like the biggest component that I've seen, because I worked in this industry for so long, and that always broke my heart. I mean, I worked with, so I can't even count how many messages I have from women. And the message is the same, whether the woman was a size 0 or a size 26, like regardless, she hated herself. She hated her body. It was never good enough. It was never what society wanted, right? Like, the skinnier girls wanted to be curvy. The curvier girls wanted to be skinnier. And like Tasha said, we can't escape that programming. But as we dive into like working through our own issues with self, right, and doing that shadow work and starting to reframe like how we see ourselves, little things matter. And I think the most important thing there is exactly what Tasha said, which is start by how you speak. And it's interesting because even though I've been doing this component for a long time, where I don't say anything negative about my body ever. And I'm almost 100% sure, I hate making absolutes, but I'm almost 100% sure I have never said anything unkind about my body in front of my girls ever. Because even though I've thought it or felt it, same thing like you said, Tasha, like it starts somewhere. And as you stop saying it, you will notice a shift. You'll notice you're thinking it a little less. Not that you don't think it all, but less. And what's interesting is, so a long time ago, I had started, and I did it for myself, where if I said something negative, I'd say cancel, and then I'd say 3 kind things about myself.
I remember this.
Yeah, you remember this? I've been doing this for a long time. And I'd started doing it in my friend girl groups. And I would tell all the girls I was hanging out with, we don't talk bad about ourselves. I hate hearing someone that I love, meaning my friend, saying something unkind about themselves. Stop talking bad about my friends, right? Just like they would probably feel the same way about me. So we made it a rule as a group. And what was really cute to see is our daughter, Kalea, who's in middle school now, she had a sleepover at our house with a few friends, and I heard her do it. And I was like, what are you guys doing? And she's like, oh, well, we do the cancel now. So if somebody says something unkind, you have to say cancel, and then you have to say 3 kind things about it yourself. And I was like, she's bringing it into her middle school. And I'm like, isn't that cool? These are the changes that I'm like, these are the tools and changes that I want this younger generation to have that we didn't, right? Because it does make an impact. The more words are powerful.
Yeah.
And
it's so amazing how like we'll say things about ourselves that we would never say about our friends. Like I can't even tell you the amount of times where one of my friends who was definitely half my size has been like, oh, I'm so fat, I look so bad. And then I'll look at him like, okay, that's a weird thing to say around somebody that's twice your size. And I'm like, but you're beautiful. Yeah. I'm like, isn't that interesting how one, we can see other people's beauties even if they don't have conventional body shapes. Like you can look at me and see that, yeah, I'm beautiful regardless of what size body I'm in. And then you're willing to say those things about yourself, how unkind we are to ourselves versus everyone around us. And it should be the opposite, right? Like we should love ourselves the most and be the kindest to ourselves. And yet we're not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so true. And I feel like no matter what end of the spectrum you're on, like you said, your friend that's half your size still struggles with that. You know, I've struggled with that my whole life as well, even though people look at me like, dude, what are you talking about? Like, are you crazy? Like, do you not see what I see? And I think we don't see what other people see. We see what we see, and it doesn't matter what your body looks like. I think the biggest lesson I've taken away from doing Fit2Fat2Fit twice now is realizing that I am not my body, that my self-image is not my body image. I think once you become aware of that and you learn that, then you can look at your body totally differently, where you don't look at that as, society will define you by that, but you don't have to make that decision as well. You don't have to define yourself by what your body looks like. It's a piece of you, right? It's a part of you, but it is not the whole of you. You're not defined by what your body looks like. 'Cause your body can change. You can lose an arm or you can lose a leg and your body's not going to be the same. Your body, it can change. You can lose weight, you can gain weight. So your body, isn't always going to be the same, now versus 50 years later, it's going to change. It's going to be different. So, not using that as part of your identity, I think is really powerful. It's just like you said, deprogramming, unlearning all these things. And that's kind of what I want to get across, whether you're male or female and you struggle with things like this exercise is really powerful. Even for men, you might feel uncomfortable if you have to tell your bros like, hey, what'd you do today? Well, I had to stand in front of the mirror naked and write down all these things I loved about myself. But that's what self-love is. It's uncomfortable, especially for males, because we don't know how to talk about it. We don't know, I know it makes people feel uncomfortable, like when I talk about this, but for women, they get it, they understand it. But for men, I think men, struggle with I'm working on loving myself. And I think I want to normalize that. And so thank you, Tasha, for creating this program and helping me through that.
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, if I can help even one person recognize that their worth doesn't live in their body and their worth doesn't live in their appearance, that they are worthy just by existing. I mean, that's what the entire work is about. I think self-love really is the answer to everything. And that's exactly why I decided to create this.
It's true, especially from a weight loss perspective. And I want to plug this in because the people are like, okay, a self-love program, what's that actually going to do for me? It actually helps with everything in your life. If you want to work on, getting healthy and fit, sure, you can do it without self-love, but you'll still end up hating yourself. Even if you do get the body, it's a temporary happiness that comes from that, but it doesn't last forever. And you realize that's not the source of happiness that you need to work on. But if you come from a place of self-love while you work on, a stronger, more physically stronger body, then, that's different versus I hope I get this body, which will then help me be happy and then fix all my problems. I promise you'll realize that's not how it works. And actually,
I want to reach out about one of your followers, or I want to talk about one of your followers that reached out to me. And she said,
who?
I'm not going to say who it was.
Sorry. Yeah.
Let me identify.
That did the program, right? Because we did
we did a beta tester group, right? And it's one of your followers that has lost a ton of weight through your program. She feels great. She looks great. She loves everything about what she accomplished through your program, your workouts, all that kind of stuff. But she said to me, I thought that as soon as I overhauled my diet and that I was smaller and that my body looked the way that that it should look, right, that it would change everything. And she's like, and I still didn't love myself. Yeah. And I was like, that's maybe the missing piece there, right? We think when our body looks the way we want it to, which obviously you get your followers there. But sometimes we get to the other side and we realize but in my brain, I'm still the same. So I just thought that was really interesting.
Well, yeah, because what I've noticed through years in this industry too, is when you don't love yourself, you don't make time for yourself. And when you don't love yourself, your priorities come last. So you're probably not, taking time to cook for yourself or eat the food you want or go move your body because you feel guilty, right?
Yeah.
Like as women, and I mean, men have this too, but we've been taught to put ourselves last. And I think a big component of doing a program with Selflove is for the first time, a lot of these women are asking themselves, what do I need and what do I want? Because we're so used to doing what everyone else needs, what our kids need, what our family needs. And we often don't focus on our health at all.
Yeah. And I think the biggest switch for me is doing it out of self-love means you are doing the process, not for the results. And this is what people go into a weight loss transformation with this mentality of like, I'll put up with this process that sucks of eating healthy food and exercising if I get these results. But if I don't get these results in X amount of time, then why even do that process, right? And this is the switch that needs to happen for so many people is you're doing that process because you love yourself. Because if you actually think about it, all these things like exercise and eating healthy, might suck in the moment, but it actually makes you feel better in the long run. But you're not doing it in hopes to get skinny, in hopes to change your body, in hopes that will bring happiness. You're doing it because, I sleep better, or I have better sex, and my mind's clearer, my digestion's better when I eat healthy food, or I move my body in a way that feels good. And then you end up falling in love with the process because you're coming from a place of self-love versus self-hate, where you put up with the process for a certain period of time in hopes to get those results. Does that make sense?
I'm so glad you brought that up, actually, because I eat basically keto because it's what makes me feel good. I move every day because it's what makes me feel good. My body doesn't want to lose weight. It's not going to do it. So I do that because I love myself enough to feel the best that I can. And I think that is a huge mindset shift. So I'm so glad that you brought that up, because when we come from a place of self-love, it's not punishing ourselves until we're skinny and get the results that we want. Like nobody ever hated themselves skinny. Or for any long amount of time, right? Like it's not sustainable.
Yeah.
And statistically, it doesn't work. Statistically, if you look at every single study, if you're doing something out of like forcing yourself because you hate yourself, you're never going to make it a lifestyle. You're never going to stick with it. You're never going to create a habit. If you're doing stuff because you enjoy it, because you want to, like I make time to go on hikes or walks because it's what brings me joy. If I forced myself and said, you have to be a certain size or be skinny or be fit and you have to go to a gym, I would never do it. I would never sustain it, right? When we do things out of love for ourselves and out of the growth, it's what creates habit and sustainability.
Yeah. So let's end on this note, Tasha. Some people get self-love confused with just like eating whatever you want to, not moving a muscle and just sitting down. And I think some people, there's a component of like drinking the wine, having the ice cream, having the cake every once in a while. But how do we keep people from thinking self-love is doing nothing to better your
that's a great question. So the comparison I always make is having champagne and birthday cake on your birthday is self-love. Having champagne and birthday cake on a Tuesday night while you binge watch Netflix and cry after work is an unhealthy coping mechanism.
Gotcha.
So
and I love that because Tasha and I had a long discussion about that actually, because one of the sections in our program, which I also thought was powerful, was me taking time to realize when something was a coping mechanism and when something was an act of self-love, and realizing the same action depending on why is both, right?
Intention.
Like, there's times where I'm absolutely eating ice cream with my kids and I'm just enjoying the moment and I'm doing it out of self-love. And there's absolutely times where I'm like in a deep, dark depression and I'm avoiding all the things that I may be doing it out of a coping mechanism instead of looking at where I'm struggling and trying to find healing there. And it's also okay to set things aside and not process them right away. But I think it's key in knowing like, what do I do as a knee-jerk reaction for coping that's preventing me from healing?
Yeah, that's perfect. Man, I'm really excited for this program, Tasha, to launch. So we will have the link for the program in the show notes, you guys. So definitely go check that out there. Any last words, Tasha, or where can people find you on social media? We'll let you take the rest of the time to.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me on social media at The Soul's Evolution on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. And
make sure that you follow her on there because she offers a lot of really good free tips too.
Yeah. I try and post really helpful things every day.
Okay,
Yes.
We'll have that in the show notes. Tasha, such a pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for creating this program, and we appreciate you.
Thanks, friends. It was good to see you.
Okay, see ya.
Bye.
Okay.